Welcome to Chinese History and Mythology.
Hey friends, welcome back to Chinese History and Mythology. It has been a while since we last sat down and talked about mythological stories together. In the past few episodes, we have mainly focused on stories about historical development. The reason we have not talked much about myths is that, in the period of history we have been covering, there really were not many highly representative mythological stories. It is also because these dynasties existed for a relatively short time in Chinese history, so they left behind very little literary material. So does that mean no mythological stories were passed down during this period? Actually, no. From the Qin dynasty to the Han dynasty, roughly 221 BC to AD 220, this was a golden age in the history of Chinese mythology. If you have been listening to this show from the very beginning, you may still remember that in episodes 1 through 3, when we talked about the foundations of Chinese mythology, we mentioned Nuwa. The new image of Fusei and Nuwa was already recorded before the Qin period, but in Han Dynasty stone carvings, they appeared again and again. They were often shown with human heads and snake bodies, their tails wrapped around each other, symbolizing the union of yin and yang and the reproduction of life. It was during this time that their place as the original creators of the world was firmly established and strengthened. At the same time, there was also the story of Pangu, creating heaven and earth. The creator god Pangu, who is so familiar to us today, did not actually appear in written texts until the Eastern Han period. Do you still remember that Qin Shi Huang once sent a man named Su Fu to search for an elixir of immortality? The story of Qin Shi Huang sending Su Fu across the sea to look for the medicine of eternal life was later turned by many people into a myth and passed down widely. Many older myths were also given a new meaning in the Han Dynasty, one centered on immortality and the arts of the immortals. For example, Chang flying to the moon changed from a natural myth into a story about the elixir of immortality. This is an important example of how myths gradually evolved into tales of immortals.
As the first great age of unification in Chinese history, the Qin and Han period gave birth to myths filled with the creative force of bringing something into being from nothing, and these myths deeply shaped Chinese culture for the next 2,000 years. If we talk about the most representative literary work from the Qin to Han period that is rich in mythological color, then it is the book we are talking about today, Records of the Grand Historian. The world of literature holds Records of the Grand Historian in extremely high regard. The general view is that it is not only the highest achievement of Chinese historical writing, but also a literary masterpiece with universal value. This recognition mainly rests on two things. First, people admire the narrative art and the power of character portrayal that Sima Qian created. Second, they respect the unique style of the book, which blends a spirit of truthful record with literary technique. Records of the Grand Historian is praised very highly in world literature. To put it simply, people believe it is not only the greatest work among Chinese history books, but also an extraordinary literary masterpiece. When Sima Qian wrote history, he did not write like many court historians who simply recorded events in a cold and mechanical way. He wrote as if he were telling a story. The people in his writing all feel alive. Shang Yu's tragic heroism, Liu Bang's cunning, and Jing Kei's resolve all seem to stand right in front of you. That ability has earned the respect of readers all over the world. Western scholars have been translating and studying records of the Grand Historian for more than 100 years. What amazes them most is this. Sima Qian could write real history in a way that feels as gripping as a novel. For example, when he writes about war, he tells you how the central figure felt under pressure, how decisions were made, and what was said before death. Some of these details are not necessarily recorded elsewhere in historical sources, but through reasonable imagination and literary skill, Sima Qian makes the scene feel as if it is unfolding right in front of you. Some people compare his storytelling to ancient Greek epic and call him the Herodotus of China. More importantly, he was not making things up at random. He found a perfect path between respecting facts and telling a powerful story, and almost all later Chinese historical writing followed the model he created.
Why would a serious history book include myths in Records of the Grand Historian? Sima Qian repeatedly records things like heavenly signs, divine birds delivering sons, and yellow dragons appearing in miracles. None of these sound very much like plain fact. So was he unable to tell the difference between history and legend? To answer that, we first need to understand one thing. In the time when Sima Qian was living, the line between myth and history was nowhere near as clear as it is today. More than 2,000 years ago, People in China generally believed that gods existed in heaven and rulers governed on earth, and that if a ruler became a ruler, there had to be divine will behind it. So when Sima Qian sat down to write history, myth naturally became an essential part of his storytelling. So what exactly is Records of the Grand Historian about? For many people, the moment they hear the title, Records of the Grand Historian, they picture a huge, dusty old book, and think it is the kind of thing only top history students could ever get through. But that is really not the case at all. Let me put it this way. Records of the Grand Historian is basically a super long collection of all the wildest stories, written more than 2,000 years ago by an unlucky man named Sima Qian, who spent 13 years putting it together. He took all the most dramatic, shocking, and unforgettable people and events from the 1,000 or 2,000 years before him, from the legendary Yellow Emperor all the way to the time of Emperor Wu of Han, and tied them all together into one book. But the best part is this. He does not write the way other court historians did, with a stiff face and a dry list of events. He writes as if he is telling you a bedtime story. How Liu Bang acted like a rascal when he was young, how powerful Shang Yu was when he lifted a cauldron, what kinds of things assassins were willing to do to repay a debt of gratitude. The details are so rich it almost feels unreal. He even lays out what people whispered to each other and what they were thinking inside. Reading it feels as gripping as reading a novel. So what does it actually cover? Simply put, it is a grand mix of every kind of human story. Sima Qian divided the book into 5 parts.
There are the biographies of emperors, the stories and gossip of feudal lords, and the legends of remarkable figures. On top of that, there are chronological tables and sections on various rules and institutions. So when you open Records of the Grand Historian, you can see huge moments like Qin Shi Huang unifying the world, but you can also see Kuo Yuan's inner struggle before he threw himself into the river. You can even see how merchants, assassins, fortune tellers, and even comic performers all moved through history. There is even something like an ancient version of a rich list, telling you that making money with everything you have is serious business. Most importantly, Sima Qian was a deeply rebellious man. Other court historians loved writing about emperors and great ministers as if they were all noble and glorious, but he went out of his way to give more space to losers and ordinary people. Shang Yu never became emperor, fine. Sima Qian still placed him in the basic annals, the same treatment given to Qin Shi Huang. Chen Sheng was just a peasant, that did not matter either. Sima Qian made sure his name appeared among the hereditary houses, because that line about how kings, lords, generals, and ministers are not born superior was just too bold to ignore. He even wrote a biographies of harsh officials, where he sarcastically tears into those officials who abused their power. That is why some people say Records of the Grand Historian is not just a history book. It is also Sima Qian's truth-telling challenge to the world, written after he had been punished and thrown into prison. When you open the very first chapter of Records of the Grand Historian, the basic annals of the 5 emperors, Sima Qian writes about the 5 legendary figures, the Yellow Emperor, Zhuanshu, Emperor Ku, Yao, and Shun. In the earliest episodes of this show, we also talked about the mythological stories of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. But in Sima Qian's Records of the Grand Historian, he does not begin with the creation of the world. Instead, he goes straight into human history. That alone is enough to show Sima Qian's seriousness as a historian, and it also reflects a distinctly Chinese view of history. History begins with human beings, not with gods. But that does not mean Records of the Grand Historian has no mythological color. On the contrary, myth is everywhere in the book. It is simply woven very skillfully into the historical narrative. What makes this book truly remarkable is that Sima Qian did not just record events, he made people come alive. When you read Records of the Grand Historian, the story of Jing Ke's attempt to assassinate the king of Qin feels like an action film. Shang Yu's suicide by the Wu River feels like a full tragedy on a grand scale. The story of Lian Po and Lin Shangru reads like a handbook for the workplace. The people he writes about are never flat or one-dimensional. Liu Bang is good at using people, but he is also full of streetwise roughness. Shang Yu is brave and powerful, but also stubborn and overconfident. It is incredibly engaging to read, and Sima Qian himself had suffered castration as punishment under Emperor Wu of Han. He carried that pain with him while writing this book, so between the lines you can feel a kind of stubborn strength, as well as a deep concern for the fate of ordinary people at the bottom of society.
Records of the Grand Historian is Sima Qian's way of turning 3,000 years of Chinese history into one huge and gripping collection of heroes and villains, all through the telling of human stories. It does not just tell you what happened in the past, it also helps you understand human nature. The good and the bad, the noble and the despicable, all of it is there. Every later historian used it as a model, but not one of them could surpass its vividness or its sincerity. If you have even a little interest in history, you can open almost any biography in the book and read it like a short story. It is far more addictive than scrolling through short videos. Later scholars called Records of the Grand Historian the ultimate masterpiece of historical writing. What they meant was simple. When it comes to recording history, this book reached an extraordinary level. It was written by Sima Qian, the court historian of the Western Han Dynasty. The full work contains 130 chapters and more than 520,000 Chinese characters. It begins with the legendary Yellow Emperor and continues all the way to Emperor Wu of Han, covering a span of 3,000 years. Sima Qian was clearly writing history, yet the book is filled everywhere with strange and unbelievable episodes.
For example, when he explains where Shiji, the ancestor of the Shang people, came from, he seriously records the following story. Zi's mother was named Jiandi. One day, she went out into the wild with two companions to bathe. They saw a black bird fly across the sky and drop an egg. Jiandi picked it up and swallowed it, and then became pregnant and gave birth to Ji. Later scholars studied this carefully and believed that this black bird was actually a swallow. That is why later people often said that heaven sent down the dark bird, and through it the ancestor of the Shang was born. In other words, heaven sent a swallow down to give birth to the ancestor of the Shang people. What is most interesting about Records of the Grand Historian is not that it completely removed myth, it is that it brought myth into the framework of historical writing and made myth look like the front hall of history. The Yellow Emperor is the clearest example. When Encyclopedia Britannica discusses the Yellow Emperor, it directly defines him as a mythological ruler of ancient China and also as a culture hero. It says that his legendary rule is linked to the invention of wooden houses, carts, boats, bows and arrows, and writing. It also says that he became the leader of the tribes in the Yellow River region after winning great battles. At the same time, the Yellow Emperor is also described as an ideal ruler from a golden age, and after death he was even elevated into an immortal being. In other words, the Yellow Emperor already carries several layers of meaning at once. He is the leader of a tribal alliance, the inventor of technology and order, the symbol of ideal government, and also a supernatural being who can ascend to heaven and become immortal. When Sima Qian writes about the ancestors of the Zhou dynasty, he is just as ready to bring in supernatural material. He writes that one day, Jiang Yuan went out into the wild and saw the footprint of a giant. She was delighted and stepped into it. After stepping on it, her body began to stir as if she were pregnant, and in time she gave birth to a child. Because she felt that the child had come from an improper source, Jiang Yuan abandoned him again and again, first in a narrow alley, then in the mountains and forest, and even on top of an icy ditch. But every time, oxen and horses passed by without trampling him, and birds flew down and covered him with their wings. Only then was the child allowed to live. And this child, who had been abandoned many times, later became the founding ancestor of the Zhou dynasty and was known as Huji, the god of agriculture. A story like this, where stepping into a footprint leads to pregnancy, sounds completely unbelievable to modern people. But Sima Qian not only wrote it down, he wrote it with complete seriousness and rich detail. So why did Sima Qian insist on writing these myths into his book as if they were history? Behind this lies the deep mark of the age he lived in. In the early Western Han dynasty, society was still in a transitional stage between the world of shamans and the world of historians. In other words, people had already begun to record history in a more rational way, but the traditions of shamanism and mythic thinking, passed down over thousands of years, were already rooted deep in their bones. They could not simply be thrown away overnight. As the court historian of that age, Sima Qian inherited a cultural environment full of spirits, divine beings, divination, and prophetic dreams. There was also another very practical reason. By the time Sima Qian was writing, 2,000 or 3,000 years had already passed since the age of the Yellow Emperor. Much of the real historical material from those ancient times had long been lost. What remained were only the myths and legends passed down by word of mouth.
If he had deleted all of them because he thought they were not refined enough or not proper enough, then a huge blank space would have appeared in the history of early China. So he chose to organize and shape these myths and legends and use them to fill the gaps in the historical record. That was both a helpless choice and a wise one. Besides that, there was another very important background factor that made Sima Qian willing to write this way. During the reign of Emperor Wu of Han, the theory of the interaction between heaven and humanity, proposed by the Confucian scholar Dong Zhongshu, became extremely influential. This idea held that heaven and human beings responded to each other, that the moral quality of a ruler would be reflected in heavenly signs and natural events, and in turn, unusual celestial phenomena and supernatural occurrences were seen as hints from heaven about human affairs. Sima Qian lived in exactly this kind of environment, so naturally he was influenced by it as well. In Records of the Grand Historian, he makes extensive use of mythological themes such as the mandate of heaven, omens, and rituals. In fact, he was using a way of explanation that everyone in his time could understand and accept to explain dynastic change and the fate of important figures. It is a little like how we today prefer to explain things through logic and data, while people in that age were more likely to answer difficult questions through the idea of heaven's will. So from this point of view, when Sima Qian wrote myths, he was not talking nonsense. He was speaking in the most advanced cultural language of his own time. One striking feature of the myths in Records of the Grand Historian is that they are especially eager to give important rulers and heroic figures an aura of being chosen by heaven. If, when writing about the founding ancestors of the Shang and Zhou dynasties, Sima Qian was mainly recording existing legends faithfully, then when he came to write about Liu Bang, the founding emperor of his own dynasty, he became even bolder. According to the basic annals of Gaozu in Records of the Grand Historian, Liu Bang's mother once rested by a lake, and in her dream she encountered a divine being. At that moment, thunder crashed, lightning flashed, and the sky turned dark. Liu Bang's father hurried over to see what was happening, and he saw a flood dragon lying over his wife. After that, Liu Bang's mother became pregnant and gave birth to Liu Bang. This story is written in an extremely vivid way. It almost directly gives Liu Bang the identity of being a son of the dragon. And the most famous story of all is the legend of Liu Bang killing the white snake before starting his uprising. It says that Liu Bang was drunk and walking at night with his followers when they came across a great white snake lying across the road. Liu Bang drew his sword and cut the snake into 2 pieces. Later, someone passed by that place and saw an old woman crying by the roadside. When asked why she was crying, she said, "My son was the son of the White Emperor. He became a snake and blocked the road, and then he was killed by the son of the Red Emperor." This story is incredibly clever. The white snake represents the White Emperor, which in the system of the 5 phases is the divine power associated with the West, and the son of the White Emperor points directly to the Qin dynasty. The son of the Red Emperor, on the other hand, refers to Liu Bang himself, who represents the fire power associated with the South. In other words, this story is telling people that the fate of the Qin dynasty had already run out, and that it was destroyed by Liu Bang, who carried the power of fire. Through the use of these mythological materials, readers can feel how carefully and skillfully Sima Qian shaped his historical narrative. He was not simply recording history. He was using myth to build a grand narrative framework and to place the founding of the Han dynasty in the highest position as something ordained by heaven. There was another quite dramatic reason why myth was written into Records of the Grand Historian, and that was Sima Qian's own life experience. In the later years of Emperor Wu of Han, Li Ling led troops into battle against the Xiongnu, was defeated, and surrendered. Emperor Wu of Han was furious, and officials across the whole court joined in condemning Li Ling. Sima Qian was the only one who stood up and said a few fair words for him, arguing that Li Ling had already done everything he could. As a result, Emperor Wu of Han, in a burst of anger, threw Sima Qian into death row. Under the law at that time, there were 2 ways to avoid execution. One was to pay a huge amount of money as ransom, the other was to accept castration. Sima Qian's family was poor and could not possibly afford the payment. If he chose death, then his father's final wish and the history book he was planning would never be completed. In the end, he chose to accept castration and live on under enormous humiliation. This deeply carved personal experience gave Sima Qian a more profound and complicated understanding of fate, of heaven's will, and of human nature. He used myth to explore the relationship between heaven and human beings, trying to understand what kind of truth might be hidden behind those seemingly unexplainable signs of heaven's will. It can be said that every mythological story in records of the Grand Historian is not just a record. Each one is also a searchlight Sima Qian used in the darkness while searching for answers. To understand the mythological color of records of the Grand Historian, we also need to place it back into the world of ancient ritual culture. The earliest religious life in China was always closely tied to ancestors, sacrifice, and the spiritual force of nature. Material from the Metropolitan Museum of Art on ancient Chinese culture points out that from a very early time, both real and imagined creatures, such as snakes, oxen, cicadas, and dragons, were given special qualities and appeared in the decoration of ritual objects. Mountains, too, were seen as sacred places where vital force gathered. Another explanation of ancient bronze ritual vessels is even more direct.
It says that these bronzes held food and wine and were placed on altars as gifts for ancestral spirits, and through this, people asked their ancestors to protect the living. Once this background is brought in, it becomes much easier to understand why records of the Grand Historian could write myth as history. For ancient people, the supernatural world was never far away. It moved constantly through sacrifice, ritual vessels, ancestors, mountains, and rivers, and the legitimacy of political power. A founder of a dynasty, a tamer of floods, or a teacher of the people could also carry divine qualities, and this would not have seemed contradictory at all. So in the first half of the world described in records of the Grand Historian, the core of myth is not strangeness, but legitimacy. It gathers together those oldest, most uncertain, and most easily scattered legends and shapes them into a standard gallery of images from the early age of civilization. The Yellow Emperor answers the question of who the ancestor of our civilization is. Yao and Shun answer the question of what an ideal ruler should look like. Yu answers the question of who can set the world in order again when disaster strikes. All of these figures carry a supernatural color, yet they are always moving toward real order in the human world. And that is exactly why the myths in records of the Grand Historian give readers such a special feeling. Of course, Sima Qian did not simply accept every mythological source without question. He had a very clear standard of judgment, and that was the principle established when Confucius edited the Book of Songs and the Book of Documents: avoid dwelling on strange and supernatural things. In other words, when it came to material that was too absurd or impossible to verify, he tried not to include it, or he revised it. He carried out a great deal of what we might call the historicizing of myth. That means he tried, as much as possible, to turn mythological figures back into real historical people, and to turn supernatural events into social events people could understand. For example, he reshaped the Yellow Emperor from a heavenly ruler full of divine power into a cultural ancestor with flesh and blood, with a wife and children. This way of treating myth, by turning it into history, had a very deep influence on the later tradition of Chinese historical writing. From that point on, the official histories of later dynasties all inherited this method. They respected facts, but they also did not reject the use of mythological themes such as heaven's mandate and omens when explaining history. If the myths in records of the Grand Historian were carefully lifted by Sima Qian with the tweezers of history, patiently polished and refined, and then set into the grand hall of official history, then the next book we are going to talk about, the classic of mountains and seas, is something completely different. It is a natural treasury of myth, still carrying its original rough texture, untouched by any polishing at all. Many people may not know much about the classic of mountains and seas. This book was not a literary work completed by one single author. Instead, it took shape over time through historical compilation and integration, and eventually became the book we now call the Classic of Mountains and Seas. You can think of it as the earliest monster encyclopedia in Chinese history. It is an ancient book filled with creatures that are deeply distinctive to Chinese mythology. And in fact, even before many people ever read this book, they had already seen some of its monsters on screen in movies. If you have seen Fantastic Beasts, then you may remember the second film, where Newt easily tames a huge, brightly colored beast, as large as a fierce tiger, using nothing more than a cat toy wand. That creature is the Zuwu. The Zuwu is a divine beast from ancient Chinese myth, recorded in the Classic of Mountains and Seas, in the section called Classic of the Inner Seas, North. It looks like a tiger, has 5 colored markings across its body, and has a tail longer than its whole body. If someone rides it, it can travel 1,000 miles in a single day, and it does not eat living creatures. In the film, the Zuwu appears as an important magical animal. Its image is powerful, but also strangely lovable. It is huge, almost as big as an elephant, with a tiger-like body, sharp claws, 4 curved tusks sticking outward, and a brilliantly colored tail. It can travel 1,000 miles in a day, and when Newt tames it with a cat toy wand, it suddenly gives off the feeling of a giant house cat. Marvel films also hide quite a few creatures from the Classic of Mountains and Seas. Besides the 9-tailed fox and the phoenix, which you might recognize at a glance, the creature that steals the show most is a cute little pet called Morris. This little thing has no face, 6 legs, and a pair of small wings, and it loves to sing and dance. It is actually Dejiang from the Classic of Mountains and Seas. The text describes it as something like a yellow sack, red as blazing fire, with 6 legs and 4 wings, a being with no face at all. It is an ancient heavenly god without even basic facial features.
There was also an unexpected appearance in Night at the Museum 3. You may have been too busy watching Ben Stiller being funny to notice that the creature fighting with the main characters in the British Museum was actually Shang Lu, one of the most famous monsters in the Classic of Mountains and Seas. This figure was a minister of Gong Gong, the water god. He had 9 heads, and each head had a blue-green human face. He was an enormous serpent, but in the film, he ends up getting beaten up in a very ridiculous scene by the main character waving a flashlight around, which makes the whole thing surprisingly funny. So even if you have never actually read the Classic of Mountains and Seas, you have almost certainly seen its monsters before. The Classic of Mountains and Seas can be said to have transformed from a serious manual of shamanic knowledge into a fantasy inspiration vault for modern people. The origin of the Classic of Mountains and Seas is far more mysterious than that of records of the Grand Historian. It has no clearly identified author. It is generally believed that from the Warring States period through the Qin and Han dynasties, it was gradually built up, compiled, and passed down by many shamans and masters of esoteric arts over generations. The whole book has 18 sections, divided into parts such as the Classic of the 5 Treasures Mountains, the Classics of Regions Beyond the Seas, the Classics of Regions Within the Seas, and the Great Wilderness. It records more than 500 mountains, more than 200 river systems, more than 550 kinds of gods, monsters, and strange beasts, and more than 440 states and tribes. The Classic of Mountains and Seas preserves the oldest and richest body of early Chinese mythology, and many of these stories are presented in a very direct way, almost like plain sketching. Take the famous Nuwa, for example. In later tradition, the best-known stories are that Nuwa molded people out of clay and repaired the sky with 5 colored stones. But in the Classic of Mountains and Seas, the record about Nuwa is only one extremely short sentence. There are 10 divine beings, called the intestines of Nuwa. They transformed into gods and dwell in the wilds of Legang, lying across the road. What this means is that there are 10 divine beings who were transformed from Nuwa's intestines. They live in a plain covered with chestnut trees, settled across the main road. Some scholars interpret the phrase, the intestines of Nuwa, as actually referring to the womb. In other words, Nuwa's earliest divine nature was that of a goddess of fertility. Her body could give birth to 10 gods, and this is part of the same tradition that later developed into the story of molding people from clay. This record contains only a few words, but it reveals the most original nature of Nuwa more directly and more anciently than any long explanation written in later ages. Take another example we mentioned earlier. The story Sima Qian tells about the Yellow Emperor battling Qiu.
In the Classic of Mountains and Seas, in the Great Wilderness, North, this story is also described with the rough power and fantasy of a very early age of war. Qiu made weapons and went to attack the Yellow Emperor. The Yellow Emperor sent out his divine beast Yinglong to meet him in battle on the plains of Jizhou. Yinglong is one branch of the Chinese dragon. Yinglong gathered up a great amount of water, and Qiyu refused to fall behind. He called in the Lord of Wind and the Master of Rain, and together they stirred up a violent storm. Seeing this, the Yellow Emperor then summoned down a heavenly maiden named Ba. The moment Ba appeared, the wind and rain stopped at once, and the side of the Yellow Emperor was then able to kill Qiyu. This battle was fought on a world-shaking scale. Divine beasts, wind and rain, and a heavenly maiden all entered the fight. It was more spectacular than any Hollywood blockbuster and stories we mentioned in the earliest episodes of this show, like Kwafu chasing the sun and Jingwei filling the sea, also come from the classic of mountains and seas. Looking at it now, it almost feels as if we modern people have lost some of our power to create and imagine truly new things. Because if you look at the classic of mountains and seas, the strange worlds imagined by ancient people were far wilder than anything you see while scrolling through short videos. Besides those famous heroic myths, the classic of mountains and seas also records a whole collection of strange and dazzling distant lands. Ancient people probably felt that if the place where we live is just ordinary, then at the edge of the world, on the far side of the sea, there must be people who do not look quite like us. And so the book is filled with all kinds of wonderful records about strange peoples in faraway countries. For example, there is a place called the Kingdom of Feathered People. The people there all have feathers on their bodies, wings on their backs, and can fly. They look a bit like the image of angels we are familiar with today. There is also a place called the Kingdom of Little People, where the people are only a few inches tall, extremely tiny. Then there is a Kingdom of Giants, where people have to tie boats together when they travel by water, because one person alone cannot sit steadily in a boat and it will tip over. So they have to stand with one foot on each boat, which tells you just how enormous they are. There is also a kingdom of protruding chests, where everyone has a large bulge on the chest, as if they are always standing there with their chest pushed out. There is even a kingdom of pierced chests, where people have a hole through the front of their chest. When they go out, they do not even need a sedan chair. They can simply pass a pole through the hole in their chest and be carried along. These strange imaginings are full of the innocent humor and overflowing creativity of ancient people, and they are genuinely amusing to read. Even more amazing is that the classic of mountains and seas does not only have strange people, it also has countless gods, monsters, and fantastic beasts, and they often come with unusual shapes and magical uses. For example, there is a kind of beast whose meat can cure depression. There is a kind of fish that, if eaten, makes a person unafraid of injury from weapons. There is a kind of bird that, if worn on the head, can keep a person from having nightmares. There is also a kind of plant that can make people fall asleep and also relieve fatigue. For example, there is a snake called Fai with 6 legs and 4 wings. The moment it appears, great drought is sure to come across the land. There is also a bird called Baifeng, which has only 1 leg. Wherever it flies, strange fires will break out. These records mix together shamanic ideas, medicine, geography, and natural knowledge. They were some of the earliest attempts by ancient people to explore the world and understand it. One of the strangest figures in the book is Mu. In later Taoist mythology and folk legend, Mu is the queen mother that people are familiar with, the one from Journey to the West who holds the peach banquet in heaven. As the highest female ruler in charge of the maidens of the heavenly court, and because she sits beside the Jade Emperor, she is often mistaken for the Jade Emperor's wife. But in television dramas and novels, the Queen Mother is usually shown as a kind and gentle older woman. Yet, if we go back to the classic of mountains and seas, her oldest source, the image of Mu is truly shocking. The book clearly says that her form is like a human, with the tail of a leopard, the teeth of a tiger, and a gift for whistling cries, with wild, unbound hair and a fine jade headdress. In plain language, she has a human appearance, but drags a leopard's tail behind her, has sharp tiger-like teeth, is good at letting out piercing howls, wears her hair in a wild mess, and has a splendid jade ornament on her head. She is a great deity in charge of plague and punishment. This is nothing like the noble and graceful Queen Mother people know later. She looks much more like a fierce, half-human, half-beast tribal chieftainess living in a cave in the western mountains. The huge contrast between these two images makes people curious. What kind of thinking led later generations to slowly reshape this terrifying creature with leopard tail and tiger teeth into a kind and gentle grandmother figure? At the very least, this original version in the classic of mountains and seas tells us one thing. In the world of ancient belief, the earliest form of a god was often closely tied to violence and mystery.
Gods were objects of awe and fear, not the softened figures later fully shaped by human morality and human ideas of beauty. The large amount of material on sacrifice and divination in the classic of Mountains and Seas is a direct reflection of shamanic belief. The book records how shamans climbed specific mountains and used specific offerings and jade objects to worship specific gods, praying for good weather, smooth seasons, and freedom from illness. In some places, it also records that shamans used snakes as ritual tools, or that wearing the bones of certain animals could ward off evil. All of this shows that the classic of Mountains and Seas is not just a collection of mythological stories. It is also a handbook of shamanism, religion, and ethnography from early ancient times. As for the strange kingdoms and unusual people mentioned in the Great Wilderness, they reflect even more clearly the curiosity and imagination ancient people had about the unknown world. For those living in the Central Plains, the farther east, south, west, or north one went, the more unfamiliar the landscape became, and the stranger the people in their imagination became as well. That is how the great wilderness world of the classic of Mountains and Seas came into being, a world filled with unusual people and strange beasts. The mythological color of the classic of Mountains and Seas first comes from the way it treats space. Mountains here are not just background scenery, and seas are not simply ordinary waters. Mountains are places where gods, strange beasts, and different kinds of power gather. The sea is a symbol of boundaries, danger, change, and forces that cannot be controlled. The Metropolitan Museum of Art notes that in Chinese culture, mountains were given sacred power very early on and were seen as manifestations of the vital force of nature. It also points out that both real and imagined animals were given special qualities from an early stage. This helps explain exactly why the classic of Mountains and Seas treats mountains, rivers, and monsters with the same seriousness. In that system of imagination, a mountain was not just a pile of stone forming a landscape. It was itself a center of energy. Animals were not just animals either. They often carried meanings tied to virtue, disaster, good fortune, bad fortune, or the limits between worlds. So the things in the classic of Mountains and Seas that look bizarre to us were actually a very natural form of expression in the worldview of ancient people. Human beings were not standing outside the world and observing it.
They were living directly inside a universe where everything answered back and everything could be a sign. The divine beasts in the classic of Mountains and Seas also cannot simply be seen as a monster guidebook. They often carry meanings connected to morality, fortune and disaster, and the order of the world. The phoenix, which we know very well, is a very typical example. Encyclopedia Britannica notes that this immortal sacred bird was very early seen as a sign of peace and harmony, and was also connected with the balance of yin and yang. What is even more interesting is that in the first chapter of the classic of Mountains and Seas, different parts of the phoenix's body are given different meanings, and once it appears, it is taken as a sign that peace will prevail under heaven. That is why in many Chinese decorative patterns, especially on wedding clothing and designs, you will usually see the image of the phoenix on the woman's side. The robes of an ancient empress always carried the phoenix motif. Looking back this way, what Records of the Grand Historian does is press myth into the beginnings of civilization, political virtue, and national memory, so that myth becomes something that can be inherited, honored, and brought into the orthodox narrative. What the classic of Mountains and Seas does is open up the world as far as possible, allowing gods, humans, beasts, mountains, seas, and strange customs to all exist at the same time. The myths and records of the Grand Historian are a kind of romance with rules. Sima Qian is like a top interior designer. Myth is the raw material in an unfinished house. Some pieces are used in a modest way to make pillars, some are carved into beautiful murals, and some are polished into elegant ornaments. Guided by the grand idea of using the divine to shape moral teaching, he ultimately decorated this great house of history into something magnificent. Even though he used many supernatural materials, the overall impression is still orderly, majestic, and full of structure. The classic of Mountains and Seas is exactly the opposite. It is more like an overgrown primeval forest that has never been developed in any way, full of wildness, vitality, and uncertainty. Here you can find all kinds of strange flowers, unusual plants, rare birds, and fantastic beasts in every shape. None of them have been tamed or reworked.
they still keep their most original form from thousands upon thousands of years ago. As you walk through this forest, you never know what you will run into next. Maybe it is an owl with a human face. Maybe it is a high mountain piled up with gold and silver. Maybe it is a group of ancient people with holes through their chests, running around while carrying poles through them. We cannot simply treat records of the grand historian as only a history book and the classic of mountains and seas as only a book of strange creatures. At this point, you may already have noticed that these two books, one that seems formal and proper and one that seems completely unrestrained, are in fact like a pair of close brothers at heart. The only difference is that one has put on official robes and sits in court writing memorials, while the other runs barefoot through the wilderness, singing as it goes. And the classic of mountains and seas is different.
Just think about how fun this world really is. Those snakes with 9 heads, those people with holes in their chests, those fish that can talk, those little birds that can fill up the sea, all of them are stories ancient people told while lying under the stars, sitting around a fire, and slapping their knees as they spoke. They had no scientific instruments and no satellite maps, but they had the most precious thing in the world, imagination that simply could not be held back. When you open the classic of mountains and seas, it feels like pushing open a door into another universe. There are no rules there, no right or wrong, only endless curiosity and surprise. Alright, that is everything for today. Thank you for listening to Chinese history and mythology. If you enjoy my show, please follow, like, and share it with the people around you. You are also very welcome to leave a comment on my blog and share topics you are interested in at bonniespodcasthandbook.blogspot.com. I am really looking forward to hearing from you. Alright, that is all for today's Chinese history and mythology. See you next episode.
The sky in light, Nua healed the broken heart. Fuxi traced the world's design. Every age leaves stories bright. Yaya dynasty shaped bronze. Shang dynasty cast oracle. Qin dynasty forged the great walls. Han dynasty opened Silk Road winds. 3 kingdoms dynasty turned war to 10. kingdoms, dynasty turn war to tales. Qin dynasty led ink and mountains bloom. Sui dynasty carved the Grand Canal. Tang dynasty crowned the world with art. Song dynasty raised learn